All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, so our town hall meeting will be on February 22nd. That's a Monday. It'll be at 10 a.m. Pacific, and do the time zone math for the other time zones. Um, our agenda will be similar to last time, where we'll have kind of a welcome and opening, and we're going to do a quick update on um, uh, solar winds and kind of how that impacts our community and others. And David Wheeler is going to help us with that. Then we'll do an update on things that have been happening in the governing board. We've been making progress on a budget committee and some other committees, and we're doing this offsite that virtual offsite that Jennifer mentioned. Then we'll have the TAC do an update, and there we'll talk about the mission statement and other things a bunch of other things that have been happening here. And then we'll have each of the working groups give an update on their process. Our last meeting was an hour. We scheduled it for 2 hours, and it took us an hour and a half. This time we think we have a little less content, so we're scheduling it for 1 hour. We would love for all of you to help us get the word out. We had, as of yesterday, we had 35 people registered, and we'd love to get at least double that, maybe more. Last time we had about 100 or 120. So we think there's lots of opportunity for more people to get registered. There is a blog post on the OpenSSF website that has a link for registration, and we'd love for any of you to forward that blog post, or there was a tweet that went out, you can retweet. We also are Lindsay and Carly, and we should, is Carly here?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, we'll introduce Carly next, but Lindsay and Carly are also going to be sending out, this week and next week. We'll be, sending out reminders to try to get the word out and get some more people registered. So that's what's happening there. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm sure we want to reach everybody, people to take in and use the stuff that we're producing, as well as people to come and contribute. But do you have like a closer aim? Like, do we really want to use these to try to gain new companies contributing, or is there a preference in there?
I think we want to do both. We'd love to use these as as an outreach opportunity to get new people to join us, and that's why we're encouraging people to send share information about the meeting with people in their own communities. But we also very much want to share information across people who are currently engaged in the community. So we'd love for existing working groups to know what each other is doing. Cross-pollination is always good.
Cool.
Makes sense?
Yep.
There is we have a draft template put together, or a PowerPoint put together, and David reached out already to the working group leads to let them know about that. So there's a place where they can start putting their content in. Other questions? Okay. Lindsay, do you want to introduce Carly? Or do you want me to? Well, I can give the first intro. So first, I have some sad news to share, which is that Lindsay is going to be moving to another role within the Linux Foundation. She won't be far. She'll still be in LF. She's going to be working on events, and I think she mentioned the first one coming up is a CNCF event. So she's been fantastic, and we're going to miss her a ton. She's going to be transitioning over the coming month to Carly, and so we'll still be covered. But so welcome to Carly, and sad over the coming month. Sad, and we'll be sorry to miss Lindsay. So anyway, Lindsay, anything else to add? And then Carly, if you wouldn't mind just doing a quick intro for us.
I don't have more to add. I've loved working on this project. I will still be around. I will be working on CNCF events. And one of my first events I'm working on is Cloud Native Security Day. So I'm really not going that far. But yeah, I would love to give the floor to Carly for just a minute to introduce herself as well. Go ahead, Carly.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, my name is Carly Triggers. I just started at the Linux Foundation last week, and I'm really looking forward to working with OpenSSF.
Thanks, Carly.
Yes, thanks and welcome. Okay, I think we're ready for the next agenda item up.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, we will definitely be missed, and welcome, Carly. We're happy to have you here. So the next thing is the election process that we started talking about 2 weeks ago. So we had a couple of open agenda items on that as far as some issues that needed to be resolved. And so we opened those on GitHub. It doesn't look like we've had a ton of progress on these, so we'll just have to go through them right now. For those that did, thank you. So we'll start with the first one that has the most content, and hopefully we can just kind of walk through these and wrap them up real quick. So for those, if you remember, Lindsay had a document that she presented at the last meeting that kind of went through all of the items. And one of the proposals here was continuing the TAC chair and the TAC representative for continuity across there. So originally we'd stated that it would stay for the current term, which basically meant right now, and then when we held the election. But now it's kind of looking like the election's going to just align with the end of the year. So we kind of need to decide on both of these things kind of all at once. Like, when will we actually roll over the TAC with a new formal election? And if that happens soon, does it make sense to continue with the chair and the rep? Or at that point, should we just go ahead and just reset everything? So my personal opinion is continuity is great, but if this is far enough out in the future where things are kind of rolling anyway, then maybe a full re-election, as like Dan is mentioning here, that's good too. So I'd like to hear others' opinions and see where you guys think about that. Don't everyone go at once.
Sorry, I was doing the old talking with mute on. Yeah, no, that sounds good to me. So just to check what I'm saying sounds good to me. Is this the proposal of yourself and Dan? It's the issue that I'm looking at.
Sorry, can you say that one more time? It cut out on me.
I'm sorry, I got a little bit lost there, and I was talking on mute. So just to clarify for me what we're agreeing to.
Which one of the comments are we looking at? Are we looking at the first comment or one further down the list?
So
is it the proposal?
So the proposal right now, so there's a little bit of fluidity here, I think, which is part of the confusion. So the proposal, as per the document, was to keep myself and Dan as chair and rep respectively during the current term. But then there were some questions of what current term meant, and that was kind of based on the discussion we had last time. So current term was, we were making the assumption that we're going to hold an election like now-ish, right? And if we did that, would we continue to keep the chair and the rep the same? But now it's kind of seeming like, based on discussions, that perhaps, and there's a little bit more content here. Oh, Dan added some more as well. That the current term would kind of mean when the election was held, but that election might actually be happening a little bit later now, just to align with the annual boundary. So if we did that, does it make sense to continue keeping those two positions, potentially one position, through the next term after the election? Or do we just want to go ahead and kind of vote everything all at once that election happens? So there's really kind of two questions here. One is, when do we actually want to have this election? And then do we want to keep them on or just do it all at once? So that's sort of Dan's proposal here, is like the TAC chair elections fixed at 1 year. That started in September, because that's when August 3rd was when we started this whole organization. So how do we want to align these things?
My feel would be it would be great to keep you guys on for continuity. I think you're both doing a really good job, but also it's nice to have that continuation if the other TAC members will be leaving or parts of the TAC may be leaving as a result of the election.
Thank you.
I
Can
almost
I?
think we should come back to
So-
this one last after we figure out the timeline and everything else.
Yeah,
first.
I mean, I'm in favor of you guys staying on. I just don't quite grok the rest of the questions.
So I don't know that we have an actual item for what the timeline specifically is. So do we want to talk about that now, or do we actually want to just go through each one of these other items? Because it seems like some of these things are kind of determined by what the timeline is.
I think we're supposed to figure out the timeline too, so we could
Yeah,
add
we
an
don't
item
have
for
an
that.
actual item for
Start
it.
with
But yeah.
that. Do others have? I know that others in this group are active in other foundations. Do they? Is it usually an annual election for TAC representatives? That's one question. And then the second question is, does the election for TAC usually align with the governing board election?
So what I've seen is the entirety of whatever this technical governing body is, and sometimes it's a TSC or a TAC, that the entirety of that goes through an election at the same time. And then the special seats, if there are any, like the chair, those are voted on in like the week after, once the body has been elected. So
How
I guess
about?
now that I say that, I haven't actually been in something where there's this, some of the seats elected by the board, some of them elected by the community. I've only been in like community only ones.
I'm interested in your just following on that. Generally, are the other ones you've been in, they've been elected only by the community or only by the governing board, or?
Yeah, yeah. So in one case, for example, it's all community, and then in the other case, it's all board seats. So the board, the premier members get a board and a tax seat.
I see. Okay. And then the last question there is about, does the TAC election process coincide with the governing board election process?
So that I don't know, because they haven't had this CNCF like structure of some of the seats come from the board and some come from the community.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to mention Open Container Initiative, is the only other foundation where I'm part of something like the TAC, the TOB, the Technical Oversight Board. We definitely do annual elections, but it's the members of the OCI that get to vote. So we have the staggered, seats, but an annual election, and then a few weeks after that, we do the chair election, so that if there are any new seats or changes in role, then obviously that group should be the ones who elect their new chair. But the only thing I can't answer is because the OCI doesn't have a governing board, we don't have that construct.
It's Altez here. I've mostly worked with community-based election systems, and usually on the governance side, it's every 2 years, and there's usually a chair and a co-chair of some kind. And for the technical side, it's done on a yearly basis. Everything is community-driven.
Okay. That reminds me, I should mention, for information, on the governing board side, the elections are once a year, but then only half of the members rotate out each time. Does that make sense? So elections once a year, but for continuity, only half.
Yeah, I think staggering the elections is definitely a good idea as far as keeping continuity amongst members.
And remind me, Kim, when you're talking about the board, I thought at first you were referring to the board electing the TAC members, but you're talking about the board elects board members.
Board members, yeah. And again, that was just for information. It's not.
Mm-hmm. And I don't remember exactly how that works. The premier members or whatever the construct is here, they do or don't get a board seat, and then amongst them they elect some additional.
Yeah, right now we don't have this. We don't have the tiered membership, so so all members have the opportunity to vote on governing board members.
I see. So there was the initiating companies originally filled the board, and then the breadth of the membership then voted in some additional seats.
That's right. And then at the annual mark, we'll essentially draw straws to see which people have a 1-year term and which people have a 2-year term. And the people with a 1-year term, their positions will be, there will be elections held for those positions.
Great.
So are we going to decide that right before the people with the 1-year straws would be vacated from their position?
No, I think we talked in the governing board meeting, we talked about deciding that sooner. And I thought we said by March, but I'd have to go back and look at our notes just so that people knew and could, people who are the governing board members who would be vacating would know and be able to plan their schedules.
Yeah, it would be good to know earlier.
Okay, sorry everyone, I didn't necessarily add any clarity. I just was looking for more information about how others do it that might help guide us.
So I guess in the spirit of open, like sort of transparency here, are we talking, I think at least amongst the people here, I get the sense that there's confidence in having both Ryan and Dan continue with what they're doing. If we look at, and again, I just want to clarify, I'm not a TAC voting member. I'm offering just my thoughts on this. But if there's a date that we're striving for, could there be a recommendation put forward with a transparent vote that just suggests that in the spirit of continuity, given how early we are in the growth of this community, it made sense to go ahead and continue with the two of them, but just formalize the voting? Does that make sense? Is that kind of what we're driving towards?
Yeah, I think the primary thing that we need to do right now is determine what this process is. So yeah, basically what you're saying is sort of certify this is how we're going to move forward. We don't necessarily have to hold the vote right now, but we have to decide what that's going to look like. So I think this all kind of comes back to timeline. Like, yeah, the timeline of deciding is right now, but we need to decide what the timeline is for the future as well, if that makes sense. So when will we hold these votes? When will the staggering happen? When we hold those votes for the full TAC, are these two positions going to stay the same for that initial round, or will we reset those as well? To me, it kind of comes down to when does it happen? Like I'm fine with staying on. I think Dan is as well. If that's what people want, I'm also fine with resetting too. I don't have any preference one way or the other. I like the idea of continuity in some regards. So if we can maintain that, I think it's helpful. But definitely want to go with what most people think is going to be useful. So if we decide what this process is right now, and we say that by the end of this month we have it written down, we just need to figure out when are we going to have this hold this election process.
So what if let me put out a proposal then, which is that TAC elections are held annually, and they will follow the governing board elections by 1 month. So my reason for saying following the governing board elections is if we want the governing board to elect new TAC members, then we'd be starting with the most current round of governing board members.
So should we jump back, because we have the doc with the full process proposal, and these issues were only meant to capture like the 4 unresolved things from that document.
Okay.
So there is, there is something that contains all of the other details too. We don't need to come up with that again from scratch. I
Perfect.
think Ryan and Lindsay had a link to that.
Yeah, I'm trying to find where that link is.
I'll see if I can grab it too.
Thought we had it in last week. Maybe it's here.
I got it, Ryan. I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Thank you.
I just placed it in the chat for those that want to open it and take a look.
Yeah, so this covers, like Dan was saying, the whole process. We've got, what does the makeup of the TAC look like? We also have, and then conflict of interest, with multiples, deduping, all that kind of thing. And we have continuity in here, but as far as the timeline goes, we just put annually and then alternating. So this was the attempt to stagger, was by saying the governing board elects their members 1 year and then the technical community does the next year. But I think that might be kind of an issue for saying that there's just 1 year terms. So
I was actually just thinking about this, Ryan. Is 1 year enough from a leadership standpoint? I've generally seen 2 years is about as tight as it can get with an open community, but I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah, I thought we had said 2-year terms, but the election is annually, so only half the people get turned over each time.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it says 2 years on the second page near the top. After bootstrapping, have 2-year terms. 1 year GB votes, 1 year tech.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, so do we all agree on that?
On the 2-year terms?
2 years and then staggering the governing board and then the community based votes.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds reasonable.
Good.
Yep.
And I can throw in a wrinkle to make it fun too.
Mhm.
So if
Do
you
it.
increased the size of your TAC, you could just consider this current, those of you that are on the TAC now, as you're in the middle of your first year. And then the next vote that's coming up here would be just adding community people to that constituency. That would really grow the numbers quite a bit, and it wouldn't be quite aligned by year, but I just thought I'd throw that out there for thought.
So just to clarify, you're suggesting that we keep what we have now and then just add at the year?
Yeah.
It would just
Add next year, not every year.
Yeah, not continuously increasing
Yeah,
functions. No, that would be fun though.
Everyone's on the TAC.
So TAC makeup, infinite, add it.
I kind of like that idea. I mean, there's a balance, of course, to be struck between having too many people to get anything done and having too few people to get anything done. I found that this group has, been, I think, very productive and all of that. I'm certainly open to the idea of adding people to it, especially if when we think about the vision for the TAC, we could imagine once we have clarity on the scope of decision making, maybe delegating some of that stuff to individuals within the TAC or otherwise making use of a larger group. Like if we had a way that we knew it would be a good use of people's time, I'd be particularly in support of it.
I think a
Yeah.
caveat here would be, did the initial TAC members anticipate 2-year terms? And if there are any TAC members that did not want to do that, how would you add or subtract or work that out, just to consider?
Yeah, I think we need to resolve that in general because people might resign in the middle of a term at any point, right? Job changes, things like that. So we'll have to figure out what that sort of spontaneous election looks like. But to get back to Dan's question, the adding votes or adding seats at this election process, like I agree with what Jennifer said. Like it's a fine line between productivity and having too many people. So what do we think is a reason? Well, first, do people think that that is a good idea to add more seats? And if so, how many?
The board has what, 13 people? And
Yes.
you've got 7 people on the TAC now. And I don't know if Phil was going to continue or not. So you could potentially add 6 or 7 people from the community and then be at the same numbers as the board. And then you don't have to do a bunch of chair swapping in the next, seat swapping in the next few weeks whenever this election is.
I don't really see what we'd get by effectively doubling it. As somebody that's had to chase down people to vote on things repeatedly, having to chase down twice as many people, it doesn't sound appealing to me.
That's a really good point. I've run into similar things. Yeah, I think it has to be, I think, folks that are committed and willing to vote on issues to keep things moving forward. I think that's probably a part of a commitment. That's a priori. People would have to know that.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, something I was going to bring up a bit further into the conversation, but maybe it dovetails nicely here, is around the voting mechanism. So I see that we were going to delegate to the individual technical initiatives what counts as a contributor. I would propose that we try to figure that out at the level of the TAC, and that the individual initiatives maybe uphold those things, just because I worry that it could be as simple as join a mailing list, and then the voting will probably get stacked by someone who works at a company that has encouraged a lot of people, for example, to come and vote for them or whatever. I'd love to keep it closer to people that are active participants, and I think the only way of really doing that is for us to set the criteria of what contributor means within those groups. And why is this relevant to what we were talking about? I think that having people that are actively and continually involved in OpenSSF for some definition are the ones that are going to, I think, be more aware of like the level of participation between different members within the groups. And that like quickness to respond and other things around making active contributions is going to be an important criteria for selecting the right people for the group.
That's the model that I've seen in the past. There's generally members are put forward as potential candidates from the community based on those who are involved. And then the voting takes place or could potentially take place with a broader group, but the actual participants that are put forward are done from a much smaller community.
And Jennifer, you were suggesting that the people that vote from the community are people that are also active contributors, not just who have joined a mailing list.
Yeah, like I would love to see some kind of condition where we're keeping the votes meaningful in the sense that they are directly related to people having had, some deep involvement in OpenSSF. And I don't mean super deep that they're on all of the committees or whatever, but like someone who's had consistent active participation for a reasonable length of time.
Would it make sense if we allow that to be decided by the working group head, maybe working group head, and he can pick 2 or 3 people from each working group?
So this is what the proposal currently reads like to me, and that's what I'm advocating against, actually, because I wonder if some groups will err toward like, let's just do the mailing list, or how do we figure this out? Let's default to something super, super open. And I just wonder if the votes become less meaningful and relevant when it's about how many of your friends you can get to join a mailing list, as opposed to it's people that have actively been working on projects and other things within OpenSSF.
Yeah, I totally agree with the sentiment, and I think we did discuss this a little bit last time, and or maybe it was in the meeting with Lindsay, I can't remember. But one of the things I had mentioned was if we actually take this requirement away and just let people self-nominate, and then the people that vote are OpenSSF members, are the ones that are allowed to vote, do these requirements sort of just solve themselves, right? In the sense that the people that are going to get voted for are the ones that people know because they're contributing, they're part of working groups and they're active and, you know, that sort of thing. So do we actually even need to put a stringent requirement on who can be nominated?
I think you're talking about two different things. Jennifer's talking about who gets to vote, and you're saying who can be nominated.
Because they're related in my mind, right? Like there's defining, you know, who can be nominated, right? And isn't that what you're referring to, Jennifer, as far as like
Yeah.
whether they're involved or not?
So there's two, as Dan said, there's two different things, but Ryan, to your point, they're two interrelated things. So I was mostly talking about who can vote because I am a proponent of us keeping who gets to vote as to some meaningful definition of who has been actively and meaningfully involved in OpenSSF. Around the nomination, I actually propose to keep it really open. If you are a subset, or if you are a member of the voting pool, i.e. you have been meaningfully involved in OpenSSF, I think that self-nomination is really nice because then we prevent some of the like gatekeeping that could happen. We give everyone, you know, a fair shake at being voted through the democratic process. But then I would propose we constrain the votes to be folks that for some definition of meaningful have been meaningfully involved in OpenSSF.
Okay, I gotcha. Yep. I mean, that makes sense to me. Yeah. Then determining, yeah, how, who's able to vote and what their contribution is, like that. Yeah, that feels shaky to me. That having to make that determination, and then if somebody doesn't qualify, and like, is there a way for them to appeal that, or you know, that kind of like. I'm concerned about the management of that. I think it's a good idea. But I worry about how we can actually enforce it.
So what we did in another group, and it was a huge, I don't know, I found it a big distraction because we went through exactly what you said, Ryan. It started to dominate the TAC conversations, but what the outcome was that was still continuously debated was that you were a eligible voter if you had a commit in one of the repos, or if a work group lead would vouch that you were a contributor on something that for whatever reason didn't have a commit system behind it, like you maintain the wiki or something. So it was basically, do you have a commit? And yes, there is an exception process, and that's on the other leaders in the community to facilitate.
It's roughly what Kubernetes does as well. They have a tool that generates a huge list of people from any activity they can find in an automated fashion, and then they share that and say, if you're not on here and think you did something somewhere else, just send us an explanation and we'll add you. Somebody reviews it and then adds the person, if it makes sense.
That's a very appealing model.
Yeah, I like that too. That makes a lot of sense. We can automate most of it, and then yeah, if there's somebody missing, then there's an option, and hopefully that's the very few cases. Okay, so what do people think about that? Contribution means that you've made a commit, and then there's a human interaction to try to catch anybody that the automated tool doesn't get.
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Cool, that makes sense to me. Okay, so we landed at anybody can nominate or self-nominate, and then voting is based on contributions or activity.
I guess just to be really pedantic, voting eligibility is based on contributions.
Yes, yes.
Super pedantic.
No worries. We're used to it, software. So
Yeah, I love this field.
yeah. I know sometimes in my personal life, I'm like, I don't mean to be overly pedantic, but bad
I
habit.
come to work to be my true self.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so that sounds great. In terms of, so the next thing I think then is timeline. We talked about syncing it with the governing board election. I'm assuming that happens in the August timeframe. Kay, is that right? Do we still have Kay? My
She's
talk
on
is-
mute.
Okay.
But yes, that would be in the August timeframe.
Okay. So if the governing board elections are happening in August, so then are we proposing that the TAC election happens in September? And then this first iteration will be the community seats. And then next year, the following year, we'll have the governing board seats elected.
I think so. Like you're saying to adopt, I think the model that I think it was Dan put forward, but correct me if I'm wrong, where we keep the existing 7 and we add the 3 community in August 2021 or September 2021, and then September 2022, the existing 7 would come up for renewal.
Sort of. I wasn't specifically advocating the additional seats, just that we would do the community seats, which could be the ones we have now that are being decided, right? So part of the 7. So I guess maybe that's the first thing to be decided is, are we for sure going to add new seats or not? I agree with what Dan Lorenz said earlier, that adding more could be problematic, particularly when it comes to chasing people down and getting decisions made. But if it's reasonable to folks, I mean, I'm open to it. So what do people think about that? Adding more seats. So moving from 7 to 9, 11, what are we thinking there?
Not to derail the conversation, and if this does, we can just ignore it and keep going. But one thing I'd put forward is we've talked about, the challenges of having a larger TAC, but we've also talked about the challenges of poor responsiveness from individuals within the TAC as being a potential problem. I'm wondering, one option could be that we expand the TAC, but we set pretty stringent continuation of participation criteria, where if we're finding that someone's a member of the TAC, but on a repeated basis are not, voting in a timely manner on things or taking part in these meetings or whatever it is, that maybe one loses one's TAC chair through some level of non-participation, but we start with a larger group. I don't know if that's a good idea, but I think it's worthy of at least putting on the table as one potential solution here.
I think that's definitely a factor we need to consider and document. Yeah, because certainly if we've got a number of members on there and some of them aren't participating, that kind of defeats the whole purpose. So I'm definitely open to that.
I'm not convinced that we have this now. Like, just to be clear, like I don't necessarily know that this is the problem right now, but it would be one argument in favor of a larger TAC if we also had criteria that involved an off-ramp for non-participation, but I don't know.
It's okay to name names, Jennifer. Go ahead.
Are you calling out me? I've been working really hard here at OpenSSF, you guys, really hard.
So I think it does say somewhere in the charter that you have to have at least attended 2 of the last 3 meetings or something like that if you want to participate in a vote. It doesn't formally, lose your seat, but you lose your voting privileges.
Does it say that for the TAC or for the governing board?
I thought it was for both.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I think you lose the voting powers for if you miss the 2 consecutive meetings.
Yeah, I think with the TAC, like I'm less concerned about voting because we don't vote that often. I sort of view voting as, we've failed to reach consensus, so it shouldn't be a frequent thing. So I wonder if removing voting from a TAC rep is really much of a punishment, so much as like we really just need people making decisions on a daily basis, right? Like what we're doing right now, we're deciding process. I know once we're done with this, we'll have a different set of things to focus on, but I sort of envision it as more discussion, driving, situations and things like that, not necessarily voting. But we want to encourage that level of participation, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very important aspect for like minimum viable governance. One of those best practices was keeping voting boring, so that people didn't feel like that they had to be on the TAC to have a say in things, or other variations of that.
So just to kind of put a stake in the ground here, I would actually propose that we leave the TAC at 7 with the option of adding new members. I can see the advantage and I can see the disadvantage. So for me personally, I'd like to see it where if we decide that there is a need, like a very specific need of why we want to add more, we can do that. I guess right now I'm not seeing the specific need to do it, but certainly open to what others think.
I agree with that one.
Anybody else?
I mean, considering TAC meetings are open, I think it's fine. Anyone can attend anytime, right?
That's true. I mean, half the people on this call right now are not technically voting members, right? So, but we've had great participation. So,
Yeah, I +1 that as well. That sounds good.
okay. So we'll go ahead and just keep it as is for now, and then but we have that option to add in the future. So coming up, so we'll have elections in September, and the first elections this September 2021 will vote for the quote community seats, which next begs the question, is it going to be 3 community seats or 4? So this initial proposal was 4 from the governing board and 3 for from tech initiatives or community. A few of us, I believe, are in favor of swapping those, but I'd like to hear what other people think.
Yeah, I really didn't have a strong opinion when I wrote the first one. I just flipped a coin basically and split it somewhere. So
Same, that I don't have a strong opinion.
My somewhat strong opinion, but not super strong, is that I'd actually like to see 4 be from the community or technical initiatives, just because the nature of the TAC is community and technical. So I'd like to see the election, more people be elected by that group than from the governing board, but that's my opinion.
That does feel good.
it works for me.
Yeah, I personally think more from the technical side, community side seems good.
Yeah, I like that as well.
Cool. All right, we're officially flipping these. Perfect. Yay. Okay, so now we've got timeline, we've got TAC makeup. What were the other issues we got open? Oh, so now back to continuity that we have these. So in September, do we want to keep myself and Dan on, or do we want to re-elect those after the election as well? It sounds like what I heard earlier, most people wanted to keep it.
Well, so let's step back a second. If we're re-electing, you said community is doing the one in September, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's 4 seats. We'd have to come up with a process for deciding which 4 seats, right? Is it just
Oh,
drawing straws?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I've really seen for this is either ask if people wanted to step down anyway because they were done, and then draw straws for the remaining ones.
That seems reasonable to me, unless you want other ideas. So we can do that in August, after the governing board gets their election, we can sort of circle back with everybody and see if anyone is wanting to step down, and then if not, we'll just randomly select the 4.
I would, similarly to the earlier conversation about governing board, I would advocate that maybe we figure this out sooner so people know if their term is coming to an end, like further in advance.
Oh, in terms of determining which 4 seats?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, there's no reason we can't draw straws and stuff today. Well, not today, but as soon as we affirm this process.
Okay, that's cool with me. Yeah, my only reason for delaying it would be so that if somebody closer to the vote was wanting to step down, but we can still do that anyway. So. Okay, so once we have this process finalized, then we can go ahead and move forward on that one.
Yeah, so that guarantees us at least three people on the TAC staying on. I guess that doesn't guarantee it if everybody said they wanted to step down, but that guarantees us 3 willing TAC members staying on. Personally, I think that's probably enough of a guarantee for continuity, and we don't need to like special case anything else. But
Yep, that works for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, cool. Okay, we talked about term limits, 2 years, staggered. One thing I did want to talk about this was, so we have this alternating staggered thing. Do we want to have restrictions as far as how many terms somebody can serve? I know, Dan, you mentioned here term limits is representative lengths, but I sort of grouped the two together. So we've got a 2-year term, but do we want to limit, you can only run once, or you can only serve 2 consecutively? Like, do we want to have any limitations on that, or are we good with just letting people go?
So from like if you look at this like a maintainer perspective, then you wouldn't put a term limit on somebody who's maintaining a project. Is somebody continuing to contribute at that level, then great, let them continue to contribute at that level.
Yeah, I'm good with it too. I sort of view that voting will solve this, right? If somebody's not really contributing, then someone else could get voted in. So, but if they're contributing, like, yeah, let them keep contributing. Any other opinions on that? All right, I'm going to consider that resolved. Cool. And then we talked about nomination requirements. So let everybody, anybody's open to self-nominate or be nominated. And then we talked about voting already, determining the eligibility requirements for that. Let's see, Dan, I just want to make sure we cover everything you put in here. Okay, I think we got that. Okay, I think this is resolved as well. Any comments before we go on to the last one? Cool. And then member makeup. Okay, yeah, we already talked about this. So we swapped these. And then I believe that's that. Okay, so do we have any unresolved issues after getting through all of those? We've got timeline. We got makeup. We've got eligibility. Okay, so we can put this into a final document, put on a, put a nice little bow around it, post it. So I think the next step would be to put this as a markdown file on the TAC repo. I'm happy to do that. And then get that merged into the repo. And then I think the next step is doing what we were talking about as far as determining which 4 seats would be coming up at the September vote. Does that make sense for everybody?
Did we decide to sufficient level of granularity who is eligible for voting? Oh, yeah, we did have that mechanism by scooping contributions plus a human base side channel. Cool. Okay.
Does anybody know in those other orgs, like that tool, is it available, or do we need to kind of roll our own?
Are you talking about the qualifying tool for voting?
Yeah.
I'll find out. I'm sure
Okay.
we can figure out a way.
I'm hoping that in the spirit of the, that these are open source communities,
Yeah.
somebody has that available, but
yeah, I'm sure we'll be able to pull that over.
Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay.
And then also to Jennifer's point, in other meetings I've been in, we all sort of walk away after having agreed to things, and then people realize they don't really know what they agreed to. So I've been trying to capture, so some of this has been captured in those other documents that you had open. I did try to throw this into the minutes, And the minutes are supposed to serve as, you couldn't attend this meeting live. Can you at least understand the decisions that were made formally or informally? So if people want to skim real quickly this stuff and see that I've captured it correctly, then I think that's useful for people that weren't here, and useful for those of us who were here that will later realize we didn't realize what we were agreeing to.
That's fair.
Thank you for doing that. And I guess to that end, in whatever the document is, Ryan, that you end up putting on the TAC repo, we should aim to formalize to the degree of specificity that we decided it in this conversation, exactly what these mechanisms are, so that we've just got it all wrapped up very clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, once I get that created, I'll obviously send it out because we'll need people to approve it before we can merge it. But yeah, 100% agree.
Cool.
Yeah, and Dan, these look great. I mean, I don't see anything obviously missing. All right, well, we've got 2 minutes left, and I'm pretty sure these last little remaining things that we have on here are going to be more than 2 minutes, so we'll have to move them to the next discussion. But really, really quick, I think that last item that David put on there as far as the security threats, I don't know if people are aware of this. There's a new project called Security Reviews that Mike Scavetta has created via the Security Threats Working Group. And basically what they're doing is proactive, security assurance work and reviews, and then publishing those into this new repo. Currently that repo is private, but he's kind of getting all that together, and then we'll make it public eventually. But it's going to be, the plan for it is to use Creative Commons licensing because they're documents. And then if there's code, it'll be Apache too, but I don't anticipate there'll be much code in that particular project.
I don't anticipate any.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Point of clarification, though, I don't think it's the intent is to do any security reviews in that project. It's just to collect existing ones.
That's right. That's right. It's basically
Yes.
a single place so that people can find them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it just happens to be that Mike's team at Microsoft does these things. And so this is, there will be new ones eventually, but yeah, it's not part of that actual group to do the work. So.
Yeah, so I'm assuming since that was in the charter that there's no issues, but I thought it'd be good to raise to the TAC, hey, there's,
Yes.
It's not Apache, but but I think this is consistent with the overall charter. If somebody has an issue, please let us know.
Perfect. Cool. All right, we're at time. If anybody has any other issues, please, reach out and add any discussion topics to the top for next time. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.